All right. So I'm going to be sending this out to you in a Canvas message here in just a few minutes. But this is going to have all the links that you need for tonight. Like for example, the live Q&A starts at 6:45. Videos can be played at any time. These are all live links that you can use to access anything that you need. The ninth grade scheduling video is something that we didn't watch because I wanted to make sure that, because I knew there was a lot of unique questions that you had, I wanted to make sure those questions could be answered last Friday as we get closer to the submission of our schedules, which is on Wednesday. So really what this video does is it's a very broad, it's full of a lot of information, a lot of stuff that we've talked about, but if you want to watch it and give more clarity on some basic stuff and even some questions that you may have about credits and so forth like that, that might be worthwhile. There is the link here to the department chair videos. I pushed those out to you. I made a video on how to access those. I've also have in here, I didn't make this. This is from Bloomington High School North's counseling department. And they also have scheduling resources and then the live Q&A. The live Q&A is going to be a Teams meeting link that you can access with your family, starting at 6:45. Because I believe that's when it says on here at 6:45, the Q&A. So I'm going to be sending this out to you in just a couple minutes so that you have it, that you and your family can access this information concerning anything that you may still have a question about. One of the things to remember is that we're going to be submitting schedules. I'm going to be going through that process with you starting Wednesday. However, you can technically submit schedules at any time right now. There is guidance that's available on the Canvas or on the counselor page for Bloomington North. But that is something you can technically do now. So I want you to be aware of the fact that that you can technically do that. And according to what I heard from Mr. Chaffin, you have about a 2-week window to go in and make any adjustments that you want to make on that schedule. And again, I will go through with you step by step that process on Wednesday. Myself or Mr. Chaffin will do that. If he's available on Wednesday, I know he's going to be in the building, but if he's here during our meeting, I'll make sure that he's with us as well so he can guide you through that process. So I'm going to be sending this information, this PDF out to you with all these live links here shortly, and then you can have this to go over this with your family this evening, okay? Is there any questions about this? Okay, so again, that will be more information that will come here shortly that I'm going to send out to you. So I'm kind of on 2 devices here. I don't know if you heard me. I'm having some major tech issues. The link that I sent out was not working, and now I'm trying to backpedal. So anyways, all right, so what we need to do today, I'm going to go ahead and make the link live now for that, because I'm guessing that, yeah, I didn't save either. So it's Monday. It's one of those days. But anyway, I hope you all had a good weekend. We're now into February, which is hard to believe for me. I can't believe that we're already into February. It's pretty remarkable in a lot of ways. That to me, the year has gone by really fast. So that's my point. So, all right, if you will go back to the course page and you will refresh the course page, I'm going to show you this link that I need you to put into Notability. So we're here on today's course page, and right here, there's this common lit reading that we're going to look at called the Missouri Compromise. We've talked about this a little bit, but there's so much here that we need to kind of digest in terms of what this is all about, what is so unique about this circumstance involving this controversial law that was created in 1820 and why this is significant, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and have this into Notability as we start looking through this piece of text, because there's a lot here that is very important in setting the stage for why we're going to be talking about the Civil War. We're not at that point yet. I just want you to be clear. We're not talking about the Civil War yet. We're talking about the causes of the Civil War, but we're quite a ways away from this circumstance being, looking at all the situations put together. Because one of the things about the Civil War is that you cannot specifically narrow down one singular event that leads to the Civil War. It's numerous events that are like a chain reaction that lead to the Civil War. It's one of the things that makes it so unique to talk about, is that when we discuss the circumstances of how cause and effect is so much a part of it, it really has a lot to do with numerous events that take place throughout history that are all put together. Now, you could argue that, yes, they're all centered around the circumstances surrounding slavery and why that's such a polarizing issue, but we can't definitively look at it as this is the one event that leads to the conflict, if you know what I mean, okay? So one of the things I'm going to try to bounce back and forth with as we look through this reading is to give you a visual for what the country's looking like. And I have to share and unshare my screen to do that. Unfortunately, I don't mean to kind of ping pong on this topic, but I do want to make you aware of visually what the country looks like at this time. Okay? And so we're going to be going up we're going to be talking about 1818 and 1819, because that's going to lead to the circumstances of what we see in 1820 with Missouri and Maine, okay? But again, you kind of see this consistency of why it was so important to bring in states as pairs. If you notice this counter down here at the bottom, this is something that's going to be crucial moving forward, because for political balancing, ideology balancing about for and against slavery, these numbers staying consistently the same is going to be so crucial moving forward. And it's part of the reason why the country's so fractured, because clearly if you just take a look at this map and you take a look at the blue areas versus the pinkish red areas, we have a very divided nation. We have a nation that clearly has some major issues because of the fact that, the term United States is very misleading at this time. We have a group of, so we're going to say 1818. In 1818, we have 11 free states and 11 slave states, an equal number to maintain a political balance in Congress. Because you really have two different factions here. Those who are for slavery is one faction, those who are against slavery is another faction, and these two factions are competing for political power, and neither side wants the other to have that advantage, because if you allow one more free state than slave state, then those two extra votes that that faction against slavery has could be used for all kinds of political power when it comes to laws being made in Congress. Okay, so that's why this is such a divisive issue as we move forward. So, but what we're going to be really focusing on is what happens in the circumstances with Missouri, which will subsequently create this line, and how we see the state of Maine being added. Now, it's not just as simple as, okay, we're going to add these states, but it does play a big role in how we get to this point and how this issue is so divisive, okay? So we're going to go through the reading. We're going to go through parts of it together. We will not get through the whole reading because I do want to take the time to make sure we understand exactly what we're looking at here. So I need somebody to please read this introductory section in the gray, please. Can I have Gus, would you mind reading that, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
During the early 1800s, the United States was a rapidly growing nation. During that time, many Americans were moving west in search of new opportunities. While most white Americans agreed that this expansion was crucial to the health of the nation, they couldn't agree about what should be done about slavery in the West.
You're muted.
Gus, I had actually meant the earlier part, the one about the introduction, but that's okay. No worries.
Sorry.
So what we need to identify here is every time we're going to see a new state being added to the Union, there's the potential for a chaotic scene to emerge because, again, you have the two factions at play that see the expansion of the country causing more division, obviously, because of the fact that we're so fractured. I mean, again, there's not another country on earth that I would be aware of at this time that is fractured and divided on the issue of slavery as we are. Now, granted, we're a much larger country than, say, a France or a Britain, both of which who have abolished slavery at this time, but it still doesn't make the situation any easier to discuss about. But again, when we talk about a lack of agreement in the West, it's really because the country's not going to be slowing down. We know that there is a plentiful amount of land out west. I mean, even if we just look at this map, this green area that you see on the map is more or less up for grabs. It's either been completely unsettled, or it's debated to be settled, or it's desired for people who are living in the eastern part of the country to move west. Okay. Gus, would you go ahead and read one more paragraph starting here?
Westward expansion had a very negative impact on the rights of Native American communities, but that rarely became a controversial public issue. This was not the case for slavery, however, as Northern and Southern whites differed sharply about slavery's proper role in the West.
So when we're looking at this circumstance, and we know that the situation around Native Americans is such a big crucial role in this time period, why is it, do you think, that the circumstances surrounding the rights of Native Americans is not nearly as prioritized as any other situation? Why are we not discussing the rights of Native Americans at this time period in history? Why are the people living in the country at that time not focused on that as a priority? What's the reason for that? Anybody can chime in here. Just raise your hand, please. Why is that? Well, let's think about this for a moment. All right, Mr. Hayslip, thank you. Want to chime in for us?
Yeah, I guess I could add one thing that comes off the top of my head. Just because, oh boy, see, that is kind of a difficult question. I would say they're not being brought up because they're more focused on themselves and other situations, I guess.
Sure. No, that's fine. The fact is that the one thing that we do know that is in the nature of what's happened in American history is settlers and natives clashing. We do know that that is part of the historical scene of what we have seen traditionally, because the Native American population was affected early on by colonial settlement, and it's still the case today. I mean, again, we know that westward expansion is happening, and when westward expansion happens, Native Americans are impacted directly because of that, and that impact plays a vital role in how that relationship develops. So the majority of Americans are not speaking up to say, well, okay, wait a minute, what about the Native Americans that are living in this territory that we're overwhelming with our populations? We're not doing anything about that. And in that circumstance, the rights of Native Americans, as has been seen traditionally at this time, are kind of sidestepped. David, do you want to add something?
So, the people of the North, so the people of the North were being affected by the people of the South, as Southerners were actually had better like farms due to being able to have slaves and stuff. So it could have been that the it could have been that the North it could have been that the pe- it could have been that the people of the northern people were just, one of the reasons they wanted to end slavery was to make their profit on the same level as the Southerners. And that's why nobody really sticked up for the Indians, because they weren't really helping either one side in such a way where the other side felt like they needed to stop it
Yeah.
or something.
No, I think that's a good point. And we do know, one of the things that is interesting to remember is that even if you're talking about the North versus the South, not everybody in the North is frowning down on slavery, and not everybody in the South is supporting slavery.
You paused.
What's that? So that is one of those things that we have to look at. And again, when we talk about expansion and development west, Native Americans are always going to be the group that is seen as in the way of that expansion long term, because if I'm a farmer wanting to move west, I see my sights set on this land, and my attitude is that for a lot of white settlers, that right to that land is greater than the concern over the feelings and rights of Native Americans, unfortunately. Yes, TJ, Mr. Haslett.
Okay, yeah. So I guess one big thing would be that after certain instances in the War of 1812, how the Native Americans took sides alongside the British, and before that, alongside the French in the French and Indian War, I guess that the Americans decided that they no longer had feelings, and they saw that the Native Americans were savages, and they just felt like, what, we're going to go out there and we're going to take this land. We need this land for our own family, and we don't care about the natives that are out there. I think that's probably a good answer there.
Yeah, and that is the reality. I'm not saying that we don't have anybody speaking on behalf of the Native Americans, but that voice is much smaller and lower in terms of the fact that, okay, we see our sights set on this land, expanding the country benefits the country, expanding, farmland, benefits trade and benefits our economy in the greater sense. That is going to be much more prioritized than it would be thinking about the terms of Native Americans.
Right. And I know for a fact that there's people like Davy Crockett, and I believe he's Tennessee, correct? Or Kentucky?
He's Tennessee, yep.
Right. But he was a frontiersman, and he actually stuck up for the Native Americans, and even at one point going against Andrew Jackson's Indian removal policy in 1830.
Yeah, we are going to see when we move forward and we see about the massive relocation of Native American tribes under Andrew Jackson, we are going to see a lot of prominent members of Congress, Davy Crockett, Henry Clay, standing up for Native Americans, saying this is not right, especially when we have treaties in place to protect this land. So very well said. Can I get a new reader, please, when we were looking at the start of, this paragraph right here? I need a new reader, please. How about Simon? Thank you.
As Western territories became accepted in the United States as states, it made slavery an explicit concern of national politics. Balancing the interests of slave and free states had played a role from the very start of designing the federal government at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. The crucial compromise there that sacrificed the rights of African Americans in favor of a stronger union among the states exploded once more in 1819, when Missouri petitioned to join the United States as a slave state.
Okay, thank you. So one thing we need to remember is that the reason why these territories, and I'm going to go back to this map real quick so we can look at this visual here. One of the reasons why these territories are so insistent on becoming states is because the fact is that, you know, if we were talking about Missouri here in 1820 as a territory, there are less rights that you have if you live in a territory versus a state. I mean, look at, for example, today, Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico has been petitioning for statehood for numerous years in American history. It's the most populated of the American territories. And if you live in Puerto Rico, you do not have direct representation in the federal government, nor do you have voting rights when you're voting for the president of the United States. And so if you're living in the Missouri Territory, having statehood is very important because you're going to get representation for your state in Congress, and the citizens of that state get to vote in a presidential election, which is a big deal. And that's part of the reason why we see this push for statehood being applied so directly. Now, with that said, one of the things that's very key in this paragraph that I think is important that we discuss is the circumstances for why we don't see a greater need to discuss rights for African Americans at this constitutional convention. Because here's the reality. They were making major changes in 1787 to the structure of the government. Remember, we're going from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, all right? That in itself was going to require a tremendous amount of compromise. A lot of historians believe that the founders did not want to address the issue of slavery because it would become more polarizing and divisive and threaten the whole existence of the country at a time where they need stability. So a lot of times when you put something off, the term is called kicking the can down the road. And so what I think is the reason for why we're having this issue again is because the founders didn't want to address the issue and waited on it to push it down the road so that later generations would have to address it, most likely when the country was more stable and had more of a foundation laid at the time. Yes, Verl.
Do you think kicking the can down the road was a good idea?
I don't, because I think it set up in a lot of ways the divisiveness that set the stage for the Civil War. But I also know that one thing to remember is when this convention is held in 1787, to my knowledge, every one of the original 13 states still did have slavery. So it wasn't as if we had begun this massive change in the identity of the states to where all the northern states began to see the issue of slavery as immoral, and all the southern states were like, okay, I guess this is something we need. It was a gradual process. But again, it's an interesting reasoning for why they didn't make a change. Because again, I've mentioned this to you before. If you look in the Constitution, you don't see the word slavery anywhere. And a lot of theories suggest that that was specifically because the founders felt that because slavery would eventually die out, the document wouldn't be tainted by including the institution of slavery, even though it clearly does. Because if you look at the footnotes here, and you go to number 3 here, it talks about this 3/5 compromise, which was used as a way of counting slaves in the South as part of the population to appeal to the southern states that were upset that their property was not going to be counted in the population. So we do know that the issue was sidestepped, and it was really unfortunately sidestepped for way too long. Okay, I'm going to close out here with this last paragraph for time reasons, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do for tomorrow. So in 1819, the nation contained 11 free states and 11 slave states. So that equates to 22 senators that represent slave states and 22 senators that represent free states. This creating a balance in the U.S. Senate. Missouri's entrance threatened to ruin this balance in favor of slave interests because Missouri wanted to be a slave state. The debate in Congress over the admission of Missouri became extraordinarily bitter after Congressman James Talmadge from New York proposed that slavery be prohibited in the new state. Well, this is clearly a problem because, well, if we look at the map, New York's a free state. So obviously slave states are going to feel very attacked by this when a free state or representative of a free state is proposing to not allow this state to be a slave state. Okay? Because, you know, the slave states would love to have that advantage in Congress of those 2 votes, but also know that it would be a divisive issue. And thankfully, as you can see here, Maine was added as a free state. And honestly, Maine had kind of developed its own identity over time anyway, and had enough had a high enough population to give themselves 9 electoral votes in the first election that they were eligible for, which was 1820. But the very fact that a northern state representative or northern member of Congress would consider this territory to be a free state was a huge issue, because again, slave owners feel threatened by something that they feel is their right to, according to the idea of slavery being property. Okay, so I want to stop there because we're in midpoint, and I want to turn our attention to the exit ticket. So the exit ticket is posted, and I want to talk a little bit about what I would like you to do for this. Whoops, that's not what I want. There we go. Okay, so the exit ticket for today is asking you to write down 2 to 3 questions that you have concerning what? Oh, I just activated this and it didn't work. Shucks. All right, well, I'll fix it real quick. What I'm asking you to do for the exit ticket, I'm sorry for all the technical issues today, is I'm asking you to write down 2 to 3 questions. 2 is fine. I'm not going to be greedy. 2 to 3 questions that you have based on what we've read so far. Okay? Two questions about the text so far that we've read. They could be predictive questions, they could be questions analyzing the text already, but 2 to 3 questions that you have based on the text that we read. And after we read through the other section tomorrow, we're going to look at these questions and try to dive deeper into kind of a further analysis of what we're looking at here, okay? Does anybody have any questions about the exit ticket? Okay, one of the things I'm going to do here in just a minute is I'm going to send out that flyer that I showed you for tonight's parent night so that you can have access tonight, the virtual parent night at North. And reminder that we are going to be submitting our schedules on Wednesday. And if you have any specific questions, I know somebody emailed me a question about a class if they're eligible as a 9th grader. I am going to find out that information for you and respond. I'm not ignoring it. I just got it through my lunch hour. So I'll make sure I get an answer for that and make sure I get back to you, okay? I will see you tomorrow here at 12, and we'll look at the rest of the text. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.